You ever notice how some people constantly apologize for things that don't even require an apology? Someone bumps into them and they say, "Oh, sorry." They voice an opinion and immediately follow it with, "Does that make sense? Sorry, I'm just rambling." They text someone, don't get an immediate response, and send another message, "Sorry to bother you." It becomes so ingrained that they don't even hear themselves doing it. But here's the thing. When you over-apologize or constantly seek validation, you're not just being polite. You're sending a message about how you see yourself. At its core, excessive apologizing is often a sign of insecurity. It's as if you're preemptively trying to make yourself smaller, to soften your presence so that you don't take up too much space. But what happens when you do that? People start to believe it. They start to see you as someone who is uncertain, someone who doesn't quite trust their own worth, and whether they realize it or not, that energy shifts how they treat you, because confidence is magnetic and insecurity, especially when it shows up in this way, can push people away without you even realizing it. Imagine you're on a date and you say something funny, but the other person doesn't laugh as much as you expected. If your instinct is to immediately follow up with, "Oh, that was stupid, I don't know why I said that, sorry," you're instantly lowering your own value. You're telling them, "I don't trust my own sense of humor. I don't trust that I'm interesting enough." And even if they liked you up until that moment, they now have a reason to second guess because you just told them you're not worth taking seriously. And it's not just about apologizing. Constantly seeking validation does the same thing. It's when you need someone to reassure you over and over again that they like you. It's when you send a message and start to panic if they don't respond right away, wondering if you said something wrong, if you should follow up, if you should double check that everything's okay. It's when you constantly ask, "Are we okay?" or "Are you mad at me?" Even when there's no real sign that anything is wrong. You might think you're just being thoughtful, but what you're actually doing is putting the other person in a position where they have to manage your emotions for you, and no one finds that attractive. People are drawn to those who own their space, to those who speak without immediately backtracking, to those who trust that their words, their presence, and their actions are enough. Confidence isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's not about arrogance or dominance. It's about having the quiet certainty that you are enough without needing someone else to constantly remind you of it. Think about the people in your life who you admire, the ones who seem effortlessly charismatic, the ones who walk into a room and people naturally gravitate toward them. Are they constantly apologizing? Are they second-guessing themselves out loud? No, they're just existing in their own space, comfortably, without needing to shrink or beg for approval. And that's why people want to be around them. Now let's talk about what this looks like in relationships. If you're always seeking validation, you might think you're showing how much you care. You might believe you're just being open and emotionally available, but to the other person, it can feel like pressure, like they have to constantly reassure you or prove that they're interested. And over time, that can become exhausting. No one wants to be in a dynamic where they have to keep filling up someone else's self-worth. It's draining. And eventually, people pull away, not because they don't like you, but because they don't want the responsibility of managing your insecurities. So how do you fix this? First, you have to become aware of it. Pay attention to the moments when you instinctively say sorry. Ask yourself, was that actually something I needed to apologize for? Most of the time, the answer will be no. Catch yourself in those moments, and instead of defaulting to an apology, try simply existing in the moment. If someone bumps into you, don't immediately say sorry, just move aside. If you say something and someone doesn't react the way you expected, don't immediately assume it was stupid. Let it be. The more you practice this, the more natural it will become. Second, start trusting your own worth. When you send a message and someone doesn't reply right away, instead of spiraling, remind yourself, they're busy. It doesn't mean they're losing interest. I don't need to chase reassurance. When you voice an opinion, don't follow it with, "I don't know. Does that make sense?" Just say it. Own it. And finally, stop making other people responsible for how you feel about yourself. If you rely on constant reassurance to feel good, you will always be at the mercy of someone else's validation. Because the moment you stop apologizing for who you are and start believing in your own worth, that's when people stop pulling away. That's when they lean in. There's nothing that creates distance in a relationship quite like emotional unavailability. And here's the tricky part. It's not always obvious. Most people don't walk around saying, I'm emotionally unavailable. They don't even realize they are. Instead, it shows up in subtle ways, in the little habits, the patterns we fall into that make connection feel just out of reach for the people in our lives. Maybe it's the way we keep things surface level, always steering the conversation toward light, casual topics, instead of opening up about what's actually going on inside. Maybe it's deflecting when someone asks how we feel, laughing it off, making a joke, or shifting the focus back onto them. Or maybe it's avoiding deeper commitments, not just in romantic relationships, but in friendships, in family dynamics, in any situation where real closeness requires a level of vulnerability we're not quite ready to give. And the reason people do this is rarely because they don't care. In fact, it's often the opposite. It's because they care so much that the idea of getting hurt feels unbearable. So they create distance, even if they don't mean to, even if they don't realize they're doing it. They tell themselves, I'm just independent, or I don't like to burden people with my problems, or I'll open up when I meet the right person. But deep down, there's often something else at play, a fear of rejection, of getting too close and then losing someone, of being judged, of being seen fully and not being enough. The problem is connection requires risk. It requires stepping into the unknown without guarantees. And if we're not willing to take that risk, we might think we're protecting ourselves, but we're actually just isolating ourselves. We're keeping people at arm's length, even the ones who genuinely want to be there for us. And over time, that distance becomes the very thing that pushes people away. Because here's the truth. No one wants to feel like they're constantly knocking on a locked door. You see this play out all the time in relationships. One person tries to get close, and the other keeps dodging, retreating, putting up walls. At first, the person trying might be patient, thinking maybe they just need time. But after a while, that patience turns into frustration, because relationships aren't meant to be guessing games. When someone cares about you, they don't want to feel like they have to decode every little thing just to understand where they stand. They want to feel like there's space for them in your life, like they're not constantly being pushed away the moment things start to get real. And here's the part that really stings. When people finally do walk away, the emotionally unavailable person convinces themselves it's proof they were right not to get close. See, they say, people always leave. But they don't realize it wasn't love that let them down. It was the walls they built to protect themselves that became the very thing that drove love away. And it's not just romantic relationships. This shows up in friendships too. That friend who's always there for everyone else, but never lets anyone be there for them. The one who listens, gives advice, checks in, but the moment someone tries to do the same for them, they brush it off, change the subject, or disappear for a while. They convince themselves they're just low maintenance, or that they don't need help. But deep down, there's usually a fear of relying on others, of being seen as weak, of being disappointed if they let someone in and that person doesn't show up the way they hoped. But here's what we forget. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the foundation of real relationships. It's what makes people feel close to us. It's what creates trust. Think about the people you feel closest to in your life, the ones you truly trust, the ones who feel like home. I guarantee you that connection isn't just built on fun moments or shared interests. It's built on realness, on the moments when you've seen each other at your most human, your most uncertain, your most honest, your most unguarded. That's what brings people together, not perfection, not having it all figured out, but the ability to be real, the willingness to let people see you, not just the polished version, not just the strong version, but the full, complicated, messy, beautiful version, because that's what makes people feel safe to do the same with you. And that's what emotional availability really is. It's not just about talking about your feelings all the time or sharing your deepest secrets with everyone you meet. It's about being present. It's about allowing people in instead of keeping them out. It's about recognizing when you're putting up walls and having the courage to take them down, even just a little. So if you've ever found yourself wondering why people seem to drift away, why relationships feel like they never quite reach that deeper level, why no one seems to stick around, ask yourself, am I truly letting people in? Not just in the convenient moments, not just when it feels easy, but in the moments when it actually requires effort. Because connection isn't something that just happens. It's something we have to choose over and over again. And that choice starts with allowing ourselves to be seen. Have you ever found yourself giving and giving in a relationship, whether it's a friendship, a romantic relationship, or even a professional one, only to feel drained, unappreciated, or even resentful? You say yes when you want to say no. You go out of your way to make someone happy. You bend over backward to be available, to be reliable, to be the one who always shows up. And yet, despite all of this effort, you feel like you're being taken for granted. The more you give, the less it seems to be valued. And the worst part, you can't even be mad at them because in your mind, you chose to do all of it. But deep down, you wonder, why does it feel like the more I give, the more they pull away? This is what happens when we neglect our own boundaries and overextend ourselves in relationships. We think we're being generous. We think we're being kind. But what we don't realize is that often overgiving doesn't come from a place of confidence or true generosity. It comes from fear. Fear that if we don't do enough, we won't be loved. Fear that if we say no, they'll walk away. Fear that if we don't constantly prove our worth through effort, we won't be seen as valuable. And when our generosity is driven by fear rather than abundance, it stops being generosity. It becomes a transaction, a silent, unspoken trade where we give and give secretly hoping that one day the other person will give back in the way we need them to. But here's the harsh truth. Overgiving doesn't make people love you more. In fact, it often does the opposite. When you give too much without boundaries, it can start to feel suffocating to the other person. Because what it really communicates is, I don't trust that I'm enough as I am. I believe I have to earn my place in your life. And when people sense that, they start to pull away. Not necessarily because they don't appreciate you, but because healthy relationships aren't built on indebtedness. They're built on mutual respect, on desire, on the willingness to be there for each other without feeling like it's an obligation or a strategy to secure love. Think about the relationships in your life where you felt the most attracted to someone, the most drawn to them. Was it the person who constantly overextended themselves, who always said yes, who sacrificed their own needs for you at every turn? Or was it the person who had their own life, their own standards, who gave to you in a way that felt genuine and effortless because they wanted to, not because they felt like they had to? We respect people who respect themselves. We value people who value themselves. And when someone knows their worth, they don't need to prove it by overgiving. Now, this doesn't mean you should stop being kind. It doesn't mean you should stop being generous. Those are beautiful qualities. But true generosity isn't about exhausting yourself for others. It's about giving from a place of confidence, not from a place of fear. And that starts with boundaries. Boundaries are not walls that push people away. They are filters that protect the most valuable parts of you from being depleted. They are the difference between giving because you want to and giving because you're afraid not to. So what does this actually look like in practice? Let's say a friend always calls you to vent about their problems, but when you need support, they're nowhere to be found. A version of you without boundaries might keep answering those calls, keep listening, keep giving advice because you don't want to seem selfish. But a version of you with boundaries would recognize this is not a balanced dynamic. And instead of just letting resentment build, you would address it. Maybe you stop answering every call immediately. Maybe you say, hey, I really want to be there for you, but I also need to make sure our friendship is supportive for both of us. That small act of self-respect shifts the entire dynamic. Or maybe in a romantic relationship, you find yourself always being the one to plan, to initiate, to accommodate the other person's needs. You tell yourself, well, I don't mind, but deep down you do. Deep down you wish they would put in the same effort. The problem is, if you keep showing up as the person who does everything, you're setting a precedent. You're teaching them that they don't need to step up, because you'll always be the one to fill in the gaps. But when you start respecting your own effort, when you take a step back and allow space for the other person to meet you halfway, you're no longer just giving, you're inviting them to invest in you too. And let's talk about what happens when you overgive in dating. Have you ever noticed that the people who do the most, who send the long paragraphs, who are always available, who rearrange their schedule at the drop of a hat, often end up feeling unappreciated? It's not because people don't value kindness. It's because attraction isn't just built on effort. It's built on mystery, on desire, on the sense that someone has a life outside of you that is so interesting, you want to be part of it. When you overgive, when you make yourself too available, too accommodating, too self-sacrificing, you lose the very thing that makes someone want to chase you, your sense of self. The healthiest, most attractive relationships happen when two people bring value to each other's lives, not when one person is constantly proving their value through effort. And if you find yourself in a dynamic where you're always the one giving and it never feels like enough, the answer isn't to do more. The answer is to take a step back and ask yourself, am I giving in a way that feels good to me? Or am I giving because I'm afraid of what will happen if I stop? Because when you start giving from a place of confidence, everything changes. You stop feeling exhausted. You stop feeling resentful. You start showing up in relationships as someone who knows their worth, someone who doesn't need to earn love, but who chooses to give love in a way that feels healthy, fulfilling, and mutual. And that is what creates real, lasting connection. Passive-aggressive communication is one of the most damaging patterns that can quietly push people away. And yet, most of the time, we don't even realize we're doing it. It's that subtle eye roll when someone says something you don't agree with. It's the heavy sigh when you're upset but don't want to say what's actually bothering you. It's the sarcastic, oh, don't worry about me, when you really do want them to worry about you. And while these things might seem small, over time they create an emotional distance that makes relationships exhausting for the people around you. The tricky part is that passive-aggressive behavior often feels justified in the moment. Maybe you're frustrated with your partner for not texting back fast enough. So instead of saying, hey, I felt a little ignored today, you wait longer than usual to reply to them. Maybe a friend cancels plans at the last minute, and instead of saying, I was really looking forward to seeing you, you send a short, cool, whatever. You tell yourself that you're just protecting yourself, that if they really cared, they'd pick up on the signals you're giving. But here's the problem, people aren't mind readers. And even if they sense that something is wrong, they don't always know what it is. That's where the damage happens. Because when you rely on passive aggression, you're forcing the other person to play a guessing game. And not only is that exhausting, but it's also deeply unfair. No one wants to feel like they're constantly tiptoeing around someone, trying to figure out what's actually wrong. No one enjoys being tested, especially when they don't even know they're being tested. And yet this is exactly what passive-aggressive behavior does. It creates confusion, it builds resentment, and it makes even simple interactions feel unnecessarily tense. Now, here's the part most people don't talk about. Passive aggression usually comes from a place of fear. It's not that you don't want to communicate your feelings, it's that you're afraid of the response you might get if you actually say what's on your mind. You're afraid of being dismissed, of not being taken seriously, of coming across as needy. So instead of stating what you feel, you hint at it. Instead of expressing what you need, you punish the other person for not already knowing. And in the short term, this might feel safer, but in the long term, it's one of the fastest ways to push people away, because no one wants to be in a relationship where they constantly feel like they're failing a test they didn't know they were taking. Think about how this plays out in relationships. Let's say your partner forgot to do something important. Maybe they didn't call when they said they would, or they didn't acknowledge something meaningful to you. A direct communicator would say, "Hey, I was really hoping to hear from you earlier. It made me feel like I wasn't a priority today." That's clear, honest, and it gives the other person a chance to understand how you feel and respond accordingly. But a passive-aggressive communicator would take a different route. Maybe they'd make a sarcastic comment like, "Wow, must be nice to have such a busy life that you forget about me." Or maybe they'd withdraw completely, giving short, cold responses, hoping the other person will eventually ask what's wrong. The issue is that even if they do ask what's wrong, you've already set the interaction up to feel like a punishment rather than a conversation. Instead of working toward a solution, you've created distance. Instead of giving them a chance to fix it, you've made them feel like they're being scolded. And when this happens repeatedly, people start to check out. They stop wanting to engage. They feel like no matter what they do, it won't be good enough. So eventually, they stop trying. And this isn't just about romantic relationships. It happens in friendships too. Maybe you've been the friend who always makes the plans, and you're tired of being the one to initiate. Instead of saying, "Hey, I'd love it if you made the effort to plan something next time," you pull back. You stop reaching out. You start responding to their texts with less enthusiasm, hoping they'll notice and take the hint. But here's the problem. They might notice, or they might just assume you're busy. And if they don't pick up on the signals you're sending, suddenly there's this unspoken tension where things start to feel weird. Not because either of you did something terrible, but because one of you had a need that wasn't expressed clearly. The irony in all of this is that passive-aggressive behavior usually comes from people who want deeper connection. They want to feel understood. They want their needs to be met. But because they're too afraid to be direct, they end up creating the exact opposite outcome. They create distance. They create confusion. They create resentment. So how do you stop? How do you break the habit of passive-aggressive communication and start creating real connection? It starts with recognizing when you're doing it. Pay attention to those moments when you feel tempted to drop a hint instead of saying what you actually mean. Ask yourself, what am I really trying to communicate right now? And then, this is the most important part, just say it. Yes, it might feel uncomfortable. Yes, it might feel vulnerable, but the truth is, vulnerability is what builds real relationships. Being direct about what you feel and what you need doesn't make you weak. It makes you trustworthy. It makes people feel safe around you because they know exactly where they stand. And when people feel safe around you, they don't pull away. They lean in. Because at the end of the day, no one wants to spend their energy decoding someone else's emotions. They want to connect. They want to understand. And the fastest way to make that happen is to be clear, be honest, and stop expecting people to read between the lines. One of the biggest ways people push others away without even realizing it is by projecting their past experiences onto new connections. It's something we all do at some point. We go through something painful, whether it's betrayal, abandonment, or rejection, and without meaning to, we carry the emotional scars forward. We don't see people for who they are in the present moment. We see them through the lens of who hurt us before. Maybe you've been in a relationship where someone lied to you, and now, even when you're with someone completely different, you find yourself questioning their words, reading between the lines, second-guessing their intentions. Maybe you had a friend who let you down, so now you assume that new people in your life will eventually disappoint you too. It's a natural defense mechanism. Your brain is trying to protect you from getting hurt again. But in doing so, it's actually keeping you from experiencing real connection. What happens when we project our past onto the present is that we begin to sabotage relationships before they even have a chance to grow. Let's say you're dating someone new and they don't respond to your text right away. A completely neutral situation. But if you've been with someone in the past who ignored you as a way of controlling you, you might immediately start feeling anxious. Instead of assuming this person is just busy, your mind jumps to, are they losing interest? Are they playing games? And suddenly you're reacting not to what's actually happening, but to a past version of pain that has nothing to do with the current moment. The problem is, people feel it when you don't trust them. Even if you don't say it out loud, the energy of mistrust is heavy. It makes interactions feel tense. It makes people feel like they're constantly being tested, like they have to prove themselves innocent of something they didn't even do. And that's exhausting. No one wants to be in a relationship, or romantic or otherwise, where they feel like they're paying for someone else's mistakes. And this doesn't just show up in the way we react to people. It shows up in the walls we put up. Maybe you don't allow yourself to be fully open with someone new because in the past, when you did, it backfired. So now, instead of being vulnerable, you keep things surface level. You keep a safe distance. You convince yourself that if you don't get too attached, you won't get hurt. But in reality, the only thing that distance guarantees is that you'll never truly connect. Because connection requires risk. It requires stepping into the unknown, even when the past has given you reasons to be afraid. One of the sneakiest ways past wounds creep into the present is through expectations. If you've been treated poorly before, you might start expecting the worst from people as a way of protecting yourself. You tell yourself, if I expect them to disappoint me, it won't hurt when they do. But the irony is, when you expect the worst, you start acting in ways that almost create the very outcome you're afraid of. If you go into a new relationship already convinced that it's going to fail, you're not going to show up as the best version of yourself. You're going to be guarded. You're going to be hesitant. You're going to hold back. And the other person, sensing that energy, is either going to feel like they can never break through to you or eventually get tired of trying. It's important to recognize that not everyone is the same. Just because someone hurt you before doesn't mean the next person will. But if you don't heal from what happened, you'll keep reliving it in different forms. And that's the real tragedy. Not what happened to you, but the fact that you let it define your future. So, how do you break the cycle? First, you have to become aware of it. Start paying attention to when you're reacting to a present situation with the emotions of the past. Ask yourself, is this reaction about what's happening right now, or is it about something that happened before? Second, give new people the chance to be new. Don't make them earn your trust because of someone else's mistakes. Let them show you who they are without the shadow of the past looming over them. And most importantly, remember that healing doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means deciding that it doesn't get to control what happens next. Because the truth is, if you're always waiting for history to repeat itself, you'll never get the chance to write a new story.